Black Myth Wukong, an intense action-adventure RPG with Souls-like elements based on Chinese mythology. After over 60 hours, I 100%ed the game and got the Platinum Trophy. So let's discuss if this big monkey is a huge win or a huge fall. As always, consider liking, subbing, and supporting through the join or super thanks button. The narrative takes place after the legendary novel Journey to the West. Sun Wukong, despite ascending to Buddhahood, has rejected life in the celestial court and instead yearns to live in peace on the mountain, free from responsibilities. Erling Shen, a god, is tasked with bringing him back to the court by force. The resultant battle ends with Sun Wukong almost getting bound to the celestial court through a headband, but manages to split his powers into 6 relics and send them across China. You take control of the Destined One, attempting to find the relics and revive Sun Wukong. The narrative doesn't attempt to bring anyone up to speed if they haven't read or have any knowledge of Journey to the West. Instead, you're dropped into the deep end of the pool. I decided not to look up any information when experiencing the narrative to see if it stood on its own merits, and it does. The game is full of incredible characters both entangled with the Destined One's journey and having their own adventures while you're going through the entire game. The Destined One is entirely mute but offers some insight into his personality. He's cocky, often allowing enemies to monologue or even escape, but cares about helping others. Often just calling out for help will attract the Destined One to help that person without any other information. The developers did want this world to feel alive. There are over 100 dossiers, which are called portraits in this game, that not only give insight into the origins of the various enemies and characters you'll encounter, but also their backstories. Learning how a creature called the Mother of Stones granted her son her powers to search for his father, only for the kid to head in the wrong direction and completely forget his mission. This complements the gameplay, as the mother should be extremely powerful, but given her rank towards the other stone creatures, but because she gave up her power to her son, her child ends up being more powerful than either of the parents. These stories are everywhere, and sometimes they're isolated to their own narratives. This adds to the diversity of stories within this world, showcasing that despite your own objectives, everyone else is doing their own thing. Now, that does mean that there's a lot of reading, which isn't an issue for me growing up with RPGs from the Super Nintendo and PlayStation days, but some players may find it frustrating. What is insane is that the developers included incredible animations at the start of each chapter. When completing a chapter, the player is given a portrait with a glorious image that provides a visual description of your previous actions, along with verbal summaries for those seeking extra insight. I did wish the developers included a better option for scanning the image, as you'll need to zoom in to find the trigger prompt to select each narrative. When you start a new chapter, the game provides an exceptional animated story that highlights the themes for the next chapter. These animations are simply extraordinary. They even have a stop-motion short story. With so many publishers nickel and diming players for basic cosmetics, Black Myth Wukong overwhelmingly highlights that this isn't just a game about making money. The developers really cared about what they were creating. The ending is quite profound as well. There are 2 endings, with the true ending requiring you to complete various secret objectives throughout the game. I was simply blown away, and it shows how lazy modern games have gotten with endings. Yeah, the basic ending isn't great, but that true ending was a beautiful conclusion to this 40-hour adventure. Black Myth Wukong is an action-adventure game with RPG elements and Souls-like systems. You have a stamina meter for your actions, including running, jumping, and attacking, a mana meter for your spells, a summoning spirit, which also includes its own benefits and has its own meter, a vessel slot with its own cooldown, and finally a transformation ability. As the Destined One, you only have access to your staff with mostly the same attack patterns. There are small changes with some unique staffs, such as the one obtained by beating the secret super boss, but most of them have the same strikes and patterns. This limited option in weapons doesn't remove your creative options though. The player is given many ways to upgrade the Destined One with a variety of skills, 3 stances, and transformations, all of which are tailored to your own experience and upgraded by earning experience and investing in these skill trees. This also includes armor sets gathered and crafted throughout the game, which include bonuses based on how much of a set you wear. You can upgrade the armor, but this is a hidden away side quest that I felt was unnecessary because it should have been mandatory. It requires the player to face 2 optional bosses, and if the player wasn't exploring, missed something, or decided the enemy was too hard to fight at the moment, they'll miss out on this critical feature. This is also true for Celestial Medicine that allows the Destined One to further enhance their core stats. This requires completion of a side quest, and it's something that should have been provided through mandatory means. The game does give the player a good amount of new armor and weapons through collecting resources, but the option to upgrade your equipment allows the player to continue using items they prefer. The developers did include cosmetic improvements for certain armor that are upgradable, which is a nice touch, and certain weapons are only attained by getting certain resources from defeated bosses. As for the weapon selection, you cannot swap between staffs on the fly and must choose one to use. They're linked to your set bonuses, but usually you'll just pick the most powerful option. Only about 4 of the staffs are viable for endgame content or New Game Plus. Since the Destined One cannot increase its attack power through the exact stat adjustments, your weapon serves as your primary attack determination. The developers want to ensure players have complete control over their build. When praying at shrines, players can reset any skill and redistribute points in anything they wish. The level of control ensures that you're never locked in and can change tactics on the fly if you feel it's necessary. Added to the mix are summoning spirits that grant bonuses and one-time use attacks on a separate cooldown. There are over 30 spirits that you can collect throughout the game, including bosses and common enemies, all of which grant bonuses to the Destined One and can be upgraded with unique resources. Transformations are the most unique thing in the Destined One's toolset. The Destined One can transform into certain bosses and allies you've collected throughout your adventure. This grants you full access to their moveset, and when transformed has a separate health bar, almost like a summon. The issue is that the skill tree for upgrading these summons can require a large investment, which could be better spent on the Destined One himself. Having a separate leveling system for the transformations would have been more ideal than sharing skill points between the Destined One and the transformation. In addition, some of the transformations also feel a lot slower than their core counterparts. Black Myth Wukong will pit you against some very deadly opponents. The game does a great job of slowly building you up to harder challenges, slowly gaining new spells, showcasing various tactics within the game, and practicing things like dodging. Dodging is the primary way to avoid attacks, with perfect dodges triggering a unique animation, and usually bonuses linked to that ability. Parrying does become available during Chapter 2, but it's linked to a spell slot called Rock Solid, limited in its use, and I think it should have been an entirely separate ability, not linked to a spell slot. The Destined One has access to 2 primary forms of attack, light and heavy. Performing a light combo will end in a heavy strike that can stagger most enemies and bosses. The heavy strike is linked to focus points earned by perfect dodging, attacking, and charging. However, charging focus points must be used immediately, whereas stored focus points gained by attacking and dodging can be used immediately for heavy attacks or specialized attacks without any charging. This includes retaliations, where certain attacks provide an opening allowing for an instant heavy stun attack. To use your spells and items, you hold down R2 and input the action you wish to take. I did wish the game included a training area to test your abilities. Instead, you get a demo highlighting the ability so you can see how it operates. Another option for customization is the curios. These curios boost various options and resistances. You can find these powerful items throughout the game and can equip 3 during your first playthrough if you find the blacksmith, 4 during New Game Plus, and 5 during New Game Plus Plus. Another tool is the Vassal. These tools can be used to combine powerful combat options or improve baseline stats. This includes immunity to fire, increased defense, constant attack, and stunning. You can only equip one of these, and they have their own unique timer. The last tools are your Healing Gourd and Medicines. The Healing Gourd can be upgraded with unique modifiers such as soaks that provide unique benefits beyond healing. Soaks are found throughout the world along with various drinks, with each option having a certain number of soaks that can be linked to the drink. The gourd itself can be altered to include more charges and unique benefits, adding another layer to strategy. Medicines provide unique temporary buffs and healing banes, which are the debuffs such as fire, poison, chill, and shock. You can make these medicines by gathering resources around the world, purchasing the items from vendors, or buying the completed potion from vendors. You can even find rare potions throughout the entire world. So the Destined One has a lot of options available to them. What about the enemies you'll face? Well, game science went above and beyond to create a pool of diverse enemies for each of the regions you'll encounter. Rarely are there reskinned enemies, and those who are reskinned have unique properties to their tactics. And yes, there are plenty of boss fights with a ton of optional fights, each one unique with their own fighting pattern, great rewards, and fantastic stories behind them. The boss fights are not pushovers and will easily crush the Destined one if not taken seriously. Each one has unique fighting styles, even the reskinned ones requiring the player to memorize attack patterns and find openings. I did notice that most boss fights rely too heavily on AoE attacks, often launching attacks that cover the entire area that can feel very unfair. That or having the ability to create large gaps between the player and the enemy by dashing dozens of feet away. Defeating the main boss of the chapter grants you a relic from Sun Wukong. These will give you one of 3 powerful options, with each new playthrough adding an additional choice. For some reason, the Destined one is really lacking in ranged options. Except for the pull thrust heavy attack, the Destined one doesn't really have a lot of reliable ranged options. You can't even throw your staff like a boomerang, which would have been awesome. You can jump to avoid ground attacks, but it's unreliable and the game instead encourages you to use the pillar stance, which requires a skill investment and isn't always reliable. The environments you'll explore are varied and reflect a theme within the chapter. The problem is that despite having various paths and optional areas, there are a lot of invisible walls, especially in Chapter 1 and Chapter 6. The game does have a very large selection of impressive areas, especially in Chapter 3, but at the cost of enormous empty areas that barely yield acceptable awards. Most of the time you'll get currency in the way of will, but farming enemies it's much more efficient for gathering will, as it yields experience as well. There's also no map, which is frustrating for new players in certain areas like in Chapter 3 because of the large amount of empty space. Honestly, I have no idea why they didn't include a map, as it would only be a benefit to the game. Outside of the mainline quest, several NPCs and world objectives will be opened up as you play through the game. This includes encountering NPCs throughout the adventure, across each chapter, or isolated to that chapter itself. The game takes notes from Elden Ring and Dark Souls, providing no notes for objective markers. Instead, it's up to you to remember and locate the NPCs and explore the world to find any lingering issues. Progressing too far can lead to quests remaining unfinished, items becoming unattainable, and even bosses disappearing. But these are only a handful of encounters. Shrines serve as your primary hub areas. Unlike traditional Souls-like games, interacting with one doesn't immediately reset enemy positions. Instead, you have to rest to trigger this, which restores all your health and mana. It's at shrines where you can change spells, craft items and gear, and fast travel. Loading times between traveling can be a bit long at 10 to 15 seconds, depending on whether you're going into a different chapter or just a different region within the chapter, but nothing too harsh. The player does gain access to an item that allows them to instantly transport back to the last visited shrine or checkpoint, with another item allowing you quick access to the merchant area provided you unlocked it through the side mission. When killed, the player loses nothing and is simply transported back to the last checkpoint or shrine. This is a fantastic idea, as it allows the player to fully concentrate on exploration and the challenges ahead instead of the stress of gathering experience, losing it, and having to get it back if necessary. This allows for better grinding experience, but not entirely. Those seeking to 100% the game will have to gather every piece of equipment. This includes soaks. The issue with this is that the world drops items have an obtusely low percentage. I grinded for over 5 hours to gather the Fruit of the Tao and the Ginseng Soak, and I'm not alone, with players on Reddit complaining about the same issue with the drops. I would have no issue with this if the items were very good, but they're terrible even for the section of the game where they're found in. This will only affect gamers seeking 100%, but still, this is a problem, especially since plant resources require 30 minutes of in-game time to respawn. If I didn't use the timer mechanic in the PlayStation 5, this would have taken vastly longer. They really need to fix the drop rates of these items. Black Myth Wukong captivates the player with its enchanted music and meticulously crafted world design. The game offers a breathtaking journey for those unfamiliar with Chinese mythology, featuring stunning character designs, a compelling narrative, and an immersive overall experience. Each region brings unique challenges and invokes the excitement of other titles like Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate 3, Armored Core 6, and Final Fantasy XVI. While the inclusion of Sun Wukong's Somersault Cloud adds a refreshing element, its limited use for just a specific section within the game is very disappointing. Regardless, the presentation in this game is a clear, perfect score. It is absolutely breathtaking, and it shows that the developers took a meticulous level of effort to ensure that everything was crafted with overwhelming detail. Now let's talk about the worst thing holding back Black Myth Wukong, the technical issues. It has major texture loading problems, frame rate drops, and crashing. The problems become even more profound as you move through Chapter 3 onwards, affecting gameplay during intense moments like boss fights where precision is critical. Even during exploration, the frame rate can dip to 1 frame per second, and the character model can slow down to 10 frames per second. Additionally, elaborate endgame armors clip into the character model itself, and these are persistent throughout the entire game. It's hard to ignore them, and it's clear this game was not ready for PlayStation 5. I talked to a few players who played it on PC, and apparently it runs very well, but on console there are a lot of problems they need to address. Without a doubt, Black Myth Wukong is an impressive game that showcases the potential for a sequel, even a franchise. Its intricate boss encounters, captivating worlds, and compelling presentation are commendable. However, it's held back by basic mistakes and technical issues that can be resolved through patches. Black Myth Wukong demonstrates that games can still be developed out of pure passion to entertain and deliver unforgettable adventures. If you want to play one of the best games of the year, Black Myth Wukong should be on your list.